who work at or frequently visit Disney. What do you know that would ruin the magic? Story 1. I've been stranded on a stopped rocket inside Space Mountain at Disneyland. It took about 15 minutes to get the ride moving again. Anyway, we ended up riding it with the lights on, and it's a surprisingly slow, tame roller coaster. There are fans blowing air in your face to give it the illusion of speed. Story 2. When you walk through areas of Magic Kingdom, and you smell freshly baked cookies in a certain area, it's not actual cookies from one of the stores. They secretly spray cookie smell to add to the effect. Story 3. I don't know whether this will ruin anything. It's just a fun fact. Walt Disney was a chain smoker and constantly had a cigarette in his hand. Consequently, a majority of the photographs taken of him show him holding a cigarette. In today's modern society, it is no longer socially appropriate to be a chain smoker. So the Disney company has airbrushed the cigarettes out of all the old photos of Walt that they use for publicity. This leaves Walt holding his hand in a very strange position, with two fingers extended, where there used to be a cigarette between them. The Disney company's official explanation for this is that Walt had a very unique hand gesture, that every time he pointed, he did so with two fingers. In order to perpetrate this lie on the public, all Disney employees in the parks, the hotels, the Disney stores and malls, everywhere are required to point with two fingers and are told, this is the Disney way. And the whole reason is to make the public comfortable with seeing that gesture, so that Walt doesn't look weird in all those old pictures where the cigarettes have been erased. Try it. The next time you're around a Disney employee, ask for directions, or ask where something is, I guarantee you they will point with two fingers. Story 4. I worked in broadcast services in Anaheim. There is not a single place in the park except for bathrooms, and in some cast member areas where you cannot be seen on CCTV. Story 5. I don't think this ruins anything, but it always makes me laugh. The night show at Hollywood Studios is called Fantasmic, and it ends with a bunch of characters going by on Steamboat Willie. Then they all go inside, and fireworks sparks stream down the side of the boat. Well, Ariel has a tail and can't walk, so she has to stay outside on her pedestal at the back of the boat. So Prince Eric wraps a fireproof blanket around her before going in. It's dark on that part of the boat when it happens, but if you watch for it, you can definitely see it. Story 6. Lots of visitors will try to spread the ashes of loved ones on theme park rides. Walt Disney World has two abandoned parks. 1. River Country was a water park before it closed. An 11-year-old visitor died after coming into contact with brain-eating amoeba at the park. Costume characters are not allowed to take off their costume in public. The average temperature high in Orlando in summer is around 91. In 2004, a cast member dressed up as Pluto was killed after a parade float ran over him. Story 7. Back in 1971, when Disney was deciding where to build Disney World, as a way to gain an advantage over other locations, Florida gave them the rights to create their own local government. This is now known as the Reedy Creek Development District. If Disney wants to, they can build their own nuclear power plant. Edit, I got the name wrong. It is the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Story 8. I'm a cast member at Disneyland, California. The one thing that ruins the magic is all the people who complain to get free things. I work at guest relations, and all the time people complain about trivial things to try and get fast passes or other free things. Story 9. I worked as a chef at Disneyland. Most of the food, the most expensive parts of Disneyland, the winery, Blue Bayou, use canned and over-processed ingredients. Any dietary restrictions? You're most likely getting food from a microwave. Despite having some of the most skilled chefs on the planet, they cut corners in every way. Story 10. When you stay at a resort, Disney opens a file for you. They know where you eat, what rides you've been on, and how many times you complained to a manager or guest services. That's why I think it hilarious when people online tell others online that they can get things for free if they complain. Sure, you might get something at first, but Big Brother Disney is keeping tabs on you. Whenever we have difficult guests, the first thing my manager does is pull up their file. And if you've been complaining and getting free things at every restaurant, ride, and hotel you've been to, chances are your luck is about to run out. And it doesn't go away after you leave. It stays there till the next time you come back. Think of it as your Disney permanent record. Also, the Disney Secret Security, they look just like a regular tourist, but their job is to walk around and watch for people doing things they're not supposed to be doing. Story 11. My girlfriend is an avid Disney fan and goes all the time. Her favorite thing to point out is how often they reuse old animatronics. For example, in Disneyland, California, there used to be an old attraction called America Sings where animals would sing to an audience. When the ride closed, some of the geese in the attraction were stripped and used in the queue for Star Tours as droids. A lot of others ended up going to Splash Mountain. Rumor has it they used the old Big Al animatronic for the Country Bears for Oogie Boogie in the holiday overlay of the Haunted Mansion. They also reuse molds of animatronics. So there are many in Spaceship Earth, Carousel of Progress, and Haunted Mansion in Orlando. who share faces with the president in the Hall of Presidents. Story 12, I saw some YouTube video of a Disney princess that worked at the park. She had literal stalkers that would show up constantly and talk to her. They would even get angry at the replacement. If the person the stalker was stalking had to have their normal shift off, Disney wouldn't do anything until the stalker did something physical or lewd. A 40-year-old man coming to visit a specific 20-year-old girl that had to interact with a man with a smile day after day wasn't creepy enough for Disney. Story 13, I build concerts. Did Disney on Ice a number of times. Goofy once told me about his breakfast that morning, Wheaties with beer, no milk. It was a great performance that day. Story 14, I went to a conference for a small organization in which a previous Disney CEO spoke at. He talked about how they focused on Disney princesses, so they could sell lots of accessories to girls, and how little girls are much better to sell to than boys, because boys are satisfied playing with sticks on the ground, while little girls want more. Story 15, my dad used to date this absolutely gorgeous little Armenian woman. She could have been a model, but she was in a Mickey Mouse costume. They need someone small for that costume. So next time you're taking a picture next to Mickey, just know that the person inside could be anyone from a Danny DeVito look-alike to a supermodel-esque woman. Her ex-husband was actually just as small, and he played Mickey in Minnie too. Story 16, in Magic Kingdom at WDW. There's a vacuum system that literally sucks away trash to a central location backstage behind Frontierland. The floors of that central location have to be specially treated because so many people pour their sodas in the trash. If it wasn't, the acidity of the soda would literally eat away at the concrete floor. The vacuum system also makes the underground tunnel smell. Story 17, Disney's Tower of Terror in California IRC has its specific height because if it were 1 foot higher, it'd need a bright red beacon to warn aircraft. The water on the safari cruise isn't even waist deep, it's dyed to seem deeper. Magic Kingdom in California is on the first floor. The ground floor is an elaborate network of tunnels, so you don't see too many maintenance crews or characters in the wrong area. Story 18, I've only been to Disneyland once when I was little enough for it to be magical, but not so little that I can't ride some of the rides, but the thing that stood out the most for me was seeing stormtroopers going into a break room. I really wanted to get a picture with one, and thankfully the guy at the end was nice. But seeing them go into a break room was weird. I realized that they were people too. Story 19, daughter-in-law worked at Walt Disney World. Some days her only job was to organize the strollers outside of the theater. As one group left show and took their shed, pushed the next set of strollers forward. Otherwise, you'd have the 3RD and fourth show guest strollers blocking the paths. She was constantly being yelled for having moved them. One lady said her purse was in the stroller with their passports and airline tickets. Once they found a sleeping toddler. Story 20, the Sword in the Stone is brought up by a button on certain cameras that the photographers that work at Disney. You have to have one of them press the button on, else it is stuck. Your hands don't have to be on it. Story 21, I rode on Space Mountain. When they had all the lights on, it makes the whole thing really sketchy. The whole coaster area of the building was lit up with LED fluorescent bulbs or something, and you could see everything. Stuff is a lot closer to your head than you think it is. And they use the dark to hide a lot of the inner workings instead of spending money on making it all match the theme of the ride. Overall, a really weird experience. Story 22, the Disney family has undergone a lot of drama. Roy Disney, Walt's nephew, dethroned Disney CEO Ron Miller, who was married to Walt's daughter and Roy's cousin, Diane Disney, in 1984, and installed Michael Eisner as CEO to rescue a failing company. Roy becomes vice chairman. Eisner turns Disney into the gigantic corporate behemoth it is today, but ends up being a maniacal tyrant. Eisner and Roy clash. Eisner moves to oust Roy, but he resigns first and launches a guerrilla campaign to overthrow Eisner in 2003. Eisner eventually resigns in 2005. Walt Disney's other daughter, Sharon Disney, died of cancer in the early 1990s. Before her death, she created a trust for her 3 minor children worth hundreds of millions of dollars. What follows is a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. Story 23, not Disney, Universal, but it applies to Disney as well. A lot of sets are just a shell. Seems pretty obvious, but a guest seemed really upset when I answered his question about the Harry Potter train just going through her back of house. There's nothing interesting on the other side, just offices and wardrobe. Story 24, crowds, just crowds. The ride lines are always long. It's impossible to walk around with thousands of people around you. And it ruins the experience. If you want to go to Disneyland World, go on a school or work day because nobody's usually there. Story 25, I had a teacher who was a cast member at Disney. Said that every time he smells trash, he thinks of his time there because the crew member lounge in his area was right next to the dumpsters. Story 26, Just remember another one. If you forget your name tag, you wear a spare from the manager's office. Most of the spares say Chris from Orlando, because that's a unisex name, but a lot of cast members keep the spare and wear it when they're not feeling magical, so they can't get complaints. I did actually know one Chris from Orlando who was a cast member, and it sucked for him because he never got any cast compliments. Guest relations always figured it was a fake name. Story 27, not sure if it's only at Disney stores, but at the parks as well. But when the people tell you to have a Disney day, they are basically telling you to go yourself. A lot of people go to Epcot for the Drink Around the World Challenge. Basically, they drink the national cocktail of every country pavilion, and almost everyone who take up this challenge is wasted and throwing up in the restroom at the time the night show starts. So yeah, if your kid has an urge at night in Epcot, go behind a tree. It's safer and probably cleaner than whatever is left of the restroom at that hour. Story 28, I used to work at both Disneyland and World. I think the worst part is how toxic the mentality they require is. I knew several people who had trouble separating themselves from the I have to make everyone happy constantly mindset when they left work. One of them even was hospitalized after a suicide attempt that he said was because he felt like his life was fake when he left work and that it made him a total pushover. Disney definitely doesn't want you to feel this way, but there's something about the people they hire who have constant over-the-top personalities that becomes too much. As a side effect of it, I felt sometimes like I was going to get in trouble if I didn't constantly smile or feel 100, even outside work. It definitely isn't a place that embraces reality, but for what they do there, that only makes sense. People don't want to pay thousands of dollars to go on vacation and see people feeling shitty. Story 29, that the Haunted Mansion ride used to give out death certificates till the internet ruined the freebie. Story 30, never been as an adult, but every person I know who works his work there has been a huge pain in very similar ways, so I am left assuming most of the cast members are kind of cunts. Story 31, I don't know if this counts, but this was a while ago, so it may not be accurate, and I don't visit it regularly. But here goes, I was having dinner in the castle with the princesses because of my sister, and our table was by a wall. I accidentally hit the wall, and it looked like one of those big ones about 30 centimeters across 1 foot, and it looked like plastic and felt like it. And that was the same type of brick as the outside ones. So from that, it seems that the castle is not made of traditional castle stuff. Story 32, this doesn't ruin the magic per se, but I went on a behind-the-scenes tour. It was super fun BTW, but behind all the pretty colors, in the backstage area for lack of a better term, everything is painted a patented color they call, and I'm not joking, go away green, linked to an article on it. Story 33, apparently all the skeletons in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride were once real human skeletons because Disney himself wanted them to look more realistic, but now we're better at making realistic stuff like that. So they took out all the real ones and replaced them with fake ones. Apparently there's a skull in there that's still real though. If anyone wants to do more research on where that is in the ride or has pictures of it, that would be cool. Story 34, I've only ever been to Disneyland once, but trust me, this should ruin Disney animatronics for you. Story 35, a friend of mine just got married and his wife wanted to give up her career at a law firm to go work at Disney. Sounded like she was going to get this big important position, but it was entry level. So she got there, they have public housing and get paid minimum wage, and she was forced to do menial park labor. She came back pretty fast. Story 36, Disney magic is really just public manipulation and insane levels of what normal people call customer service. What does Disney call it? Guest relations, maybe the ability to put up with insane amounts of public abuse while working for wages you could get easily outside the park. You work those wages for the privilege of working in the park. You're a cast member. It is really just an elaborate ruse that generally works. People are shocked to find out how normal the job actually is, whether employee or guest. The ride broke down and exited through a door into a long hall that looked like the one to get to restrooms at the mall. I ended up at a first aid clinic that looked like a regular doctor's office, yeah. That Jake with the Prius always steals the best spot, and the employee lot this dude was straight up cursing, and security was all like, you're leaving now, like a regular cop or bouncer or something. There's no magic, and that's what shocks people. Humans are humans no matter where you work. As a kid, I remember being shocked our WD monorail driver back, when you could ride in the front with him with a regular college student and not some magically trained space pilot. Story 37, the Haunted Mansion, is just a facade. The ride itself is in a giant nondescript warehouse. You enter through an elevator concealed in the stretching entryway, which is actually the world's largest elevator by capacity. In Disneyland, the actual warehouse is outside the park proper, hidden by a berm and sight lines for space reasons. Story 38, I worked at SeaWorld, not Disney. But there are vending machines right on the other side of those partitions that separate the guest area and employee area that have soda in cans for 50 cents and bottle for 75. Just be quick and you'll be fine. And if someone notices, you just act like you didn't see the employees only sign. We will believe you. Most employees there have a rather low opinion on the intelligence of tourists. Story 39, a ride constantly breaking down during the day. The one day I was in Magic Kingdom, I tried going on Pirates of the Caribbean 3 times. First time, it was through Fast Pass. Ride breaks down, so my friends and I were allowed to use it on any other ride in the park when on Space Mountain, so it was worth it. Second time, it was a 40-minute wait, so my friends I decided to wait out 30 minutes and we hear that the ride broke down again. Third time, at like 10 p.m. after I go on Splash Mountain, 20-minute wait. So I figured what the breaks down just as soon as I make it to the front of the line. Story 40, my dad actually opened Splash Mountain at Florida. He used to be a very well-known weatherman. People still come up to him all the time who recognize him. So we go frequently because they always send us stuff. We were one of the test families for the Magic Bands and all sorts of stuff. But the one thing I think of when people ask this is all the illusions they use. Many rides are a lot slower than they seem. Many smells and pumped into the parks. And if you walk through any of the parks without the music playing, it loses 75 of the feeling. Story 41, when their plants don't match their aesthetic standards, i.e., they're sick, too big, small, or not in bloom, they are switched with a full-grown replacement. The trees on Main Street are regularly swapped out so that they maintain the proper height to achieve the forced perspective. At the end of each season, thousands of flowers in a Mickey Mouse floral display at the entrance are removed and replaced, so it is always in bloom. All these rotations are done in one night to not affect visitor experience. Story 42, this one's pretty well known these days, but still, the people in costumes around the park are each other. Cinderella is blowing Aladdin. Mickey Mouse is banging one of the chipmunks. Ariel is taking it from Frozone, and Woody. I can't express how surprisingly common it is for those actors to just bang it out behind the scenes in between their shifts. My great-grandfather is an Imagineer and took us on our Disney World one visit, and we could legitimately hear the clapping echoing through one of the tunnels. He said it's not encouraged there by any means, but hardly anyone does anything because it's so common and apparently keeps morale up. Apparently standing around in a sweltering, goofy costume all day is worth it if you get to bang Snow White later. On the bright side, we passed a free condom dispenser inside one of the changing rooms. At least Disney sorta cares. Edit Disney World, not Disneyland. Story 43, Disney built the railroad tracks in Anaheim elevated as a way to block the horizon. This allowed for an immersive experience as to not be able to see outside of the park. Story 44, if you've been to Disneyland in the last few years and rode Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, there's a certain part of the ride where if you look in the right direction, you could see them building Galaxy's Edge. My friend, who was an AP holder, pointed out on our trip together in 2017. Story 45, I've only visited Disney once for a week, but when I was there one day during that week, I was in the Epcot park. I was walking back to the car with my family after spending the day there when I see a little boy running by. Not a second later, I hear the kid's dad say, H-E-Y. Get back here now. The kid stops and turns around to look at his dad. Then, I kid you not, in the middle of 70 people, the dad says you do that one more time. I will you up. I then sarcastically asked my mom if this really was the happiest place on earth. Once I was wandering around and got lost, I ended up in this hallway and found a door that said Character Prep 1. Being curious to see what was on the other side of the door, I turned the in feeling giddy with excitement, because much to my surprise, the door wasn't locked. I went inside were all these old Disney character costumes, a lot of them hanging from the ceiling except for a Mickey Mouse costume. It was splayed out in the center of the floor. Something really wasn't right about it, though. The coloring of the costume looked like a photo negative. Instead of his cherry red overalls, they were light blue. He was black where he should have been white, and white where he should have been black. I started to feel really uneasy and turned to leave when Mickey started to sit up. He paused a moment and then made his way to standing. At this point, I was shitting bricks. We were standing in this dank room together, seemingly staring at one another. The air was stale and felt so thick you could scoop it with a spoon. I raised my eyes to the Mickey Mouse costume. Hey, it said in a hushed, perverted, but perfectly executed Mickey Mouse voice. Want to see my head come off? And that, kids, was the last time I went to Disneyland. Just kidding, I've never been. My parents refused to take me as a child. Story 46, late to the party, but this is my favorite fun fact for Disneyland, California. It kind of ruins the magic, I guess. But if you're like me, then stuff like this is just fascinating anyway. So, in the Haunted Mansion ride, there's the famous ballroom scene. That scene is created with the illusion called Pepper's Ghost, which I'm sure anyone who has seen a crime show, or maybe works in theater, you're probably familiar with it. If not, it works by projecting an image on a glass in order to create the illusion that the image is transparent. The dancing ghosts are all on turntables underneath you, and they are being projected onto a massive sheet of glass in front of you. To keep the illusion, you would think that the glass has to be perfectly clean so you won't notice that there's glass at all. And you would be right, so it's kind of odd when you're about 2/3 of the way through the room and there's a little spider prop stuck on the glass. The story behind that is that one day in the 70s, cast members found a bullet hole in the glass, and on the opposite wall, to cover it up temporarily, they used that little spider. Of course, the question was if they should replace the glass entirely. And supposedly, there's a replacement somewhere. However, that sheet of glass was the biggest ever made at the time, and replacing it would mean removing the roof of the ride. Since it was so easy to cover up, they just left the spider there. If you like Disney park history, or just theme park history in general, I recommend Defunctland on YouTube. I also really like Yesterworld and Disney Dan. All great content if you're a Disney fan. Story 47, how many jars of human ash have been spread throughout the park? They try to keep it clean, but sometimes it's pretty apparent, especially when you know the difference between dust and ash. Story 48, you're tracked through the RFID chip in your Magic Band, park ticket, or cast member ID. At any given point, if they have to find you, they can edit XCast in the Florida parks. Adore my job. AMA. Story 49, this didn't ruin anything for me, but maybe slightly. Waiting in line to board the Jungle Cruise, and the cast member who was helping to board boats struck up a conversation with me and my husband, and just complained about all things WDW, and was also very clearly hung over. We had to stand there for 10 minutes and listen to him about Disney cruise prices, even with his employee discount, and about his uniform and his hours and yada yada yada. Like, wait on my Disney magic, dude. Most jobs, it's just weird to hear it from the happiest place on earth. Story 50, that they don't pay their staff a living wage. Restaurant workers have to return tips to management, and character actors are forced to buy and maintain costumes out of their wages. 1 in 10 workers from the OC park have been homeless during their time working for Disney, and have experienced dilemmas, such as only being able to eat 1 meal a day, or having to choose rent over family Christmas presents. A Disney cleaner who worked full-time and earned $10,000 a year died in her car, which was parked in the gym that she showered at. As she was homeless, she was fired after 3 days, and Disney asked for her uniform back after she was found a month later. In 2005, Walt Disney World reported 773 injuries to OSHA of their character workers alone, with 23 being head and neck injuries related to the costume weight size structure. Disney CEO Robert Iger earned more than 2,000 times the income of an average Disneyland worker. 23 Disneyland workers are food insecure, meaning they don't get the calorific nutritional intake needed to sustain health. Disney abuses their workers in so many ways. Story 51, I don't work or frequently visit Disney, but used to do laundry for them. You have no idea at the unbearable stench of those costumes. Even after they've been cleaned, the crotch area is especially vile. Story 52, my dad used to work there. It turns out a child had brought his pet mouse, named Mickey, and it escaped and died in the log ride. Soon after, it was closed due to a red color and putrid scent in the water, and had to be shut down and cleaned. Story 53, the one that comes to mind immediately, is Japan. As tourism gets more prevalent, people in stores and on the street won't chastise you for it as often, but it's considered super rude to point at anything. Story 54, my cousin worked at Disney for a while. I feel like she's a photographer there now. But they treat their workers like they're paid minimum wage and make you work really long hours. If you complain or want to leave, go ahead. Thousands of people are dying to have that job, for whatever reason. Story 55, I don't work at Disney, nor do I frequent the parks, but I do know that the cast members, that's what every worker at Disney Worldland is called. Even the food vendors who are friends with a character, that's what the cast members who play characters have to call the characters they play, are never allowed to stop being in character while on the job. So like, even if a guest meets them in the bathroom or something, they aren't allowed to stop playing the character. Another fact, everyone that is friends with the same character on different days, for example. Everyone who plays Donald Duck has to learn the exact same signature, so that if one person gets something signed on Friday, it won't be different to the person who got something signed on Wednesday. Story 56, anyone here been to Disneyland Paris? I go there every year, my aunt works there, and I get free entries. In the Disney Studios park, the Nemo roller coaster, IS always broken, like we never get a ride at all. One time, I was in line for 1 hour, and in that 1 hour, they announced that it was not working, and then that it was back on at least 5 times. Story 57, friend told me he worked as Aladdin for a good 3 years. First, mascots have their own hotel, and there's a whole lot of kinky going on there. Second, most Disney workers are actually homeless because of how underpaid they are. Third, there's no such thing as discount or special offer, most of the time you're paying 200 the price of something, so they can say they lowered the price of something else in that package. Last, there's tunnels under the park all mascots use because they are not allowed to be seen out of character when within the park itself. That's all I know. Story 58, my girlfriend worked in recreation over there as a lifeguard. The pools are clean daily, which is great. However, in summer the pools would close up to 6 times a day for unscheduled maintenance or something similar. This usually meant that someone had had an accident in the pool and the manager needed to get out. The kids' water area closed down a lot for this too. The water then needs retesting for safety, and it can take a long time. One particular day, they had 4 back-to-back too from same kid followed by a thunderstorm. People were not happy. But trust me, if it's closed, you really don't want to go in. Story 59, frequently vist. As a kid, I once found my way just behind the doors that lead to tunnels for staff by following a princess. Just stayed in her Minder's blind spot because I was tiny. They noticed almost immediately, though, once we were inside, so I didn't see much. Just pipes and dull-colored walls, and a guy who looked like a guard, and the princess's minder, who quickly shuffled me back outside to my parents. I also caught up with Esmeralda once and clung on to her just before she headed into the tunnels. She was in an alley where very rarely anyone comes, so she was just starting to unwrap her scarf and her hair and had to quickly pin it down again for me before I would leave. At a later age, the speed settings and lights of Space Mountain malfunctioned. It basically went at half speed, and light kept going in and off, showing the setup and scaffolding you normally don't see because of speed and darkness. Story 60, I worked at WDW once upon a time. Mickey Mouse and I used to flirt all the time. I'm a guy, and Mickey was a super cute girl. Mickey has height limits for the actor, so he's often a she in the costume. And Tinkerbell flying down from the castle before the fireworks is usually a guy, because the zipline harness apparently can be painful for women, and they need the right size person to be visible at the correct scale. Story 61, this is just something I noticed last time I was at Disneyland. It was the middle of the summer, so it was boiling like 38 degrees Celsius. And as we walked around looking for somewhere to sit down in the shade, we discovered that there was not a single place in the park that provided shade that wasn't in a restaurant or store where you had to buy something. It was that day I knew that Disney are just too good at making money. One day they will control the universe, so we might as well just sell our souls now. Story 62 worked all over WDW in Orlando. There are some locations where you'll get written up if a manager sees you and you're not smiling. Got off 10-hour shifts and was frozen in a smile until after a shower and face massage. If you're an intern, they charge you rent for staying on the property. You practically have to stay in. It's absurd amounts for what you're given. Oftentimes ID works 70-hour weeks and take home about $1,200 a month. That ruins. Story 63, a few years back, there was a huge outbreak of crabs and scabies different times within the entertainment department. Most character costumes only get washed once a week, and that is if the costuming department decides that it has been worn enough times to warrant a washing. The exceptions are Mickey's costume, gloves, padding that sits close to the body, and underdressings, the tights, leotards, gym shorts, and t-shirts worn under the character costume. Also, the character heads are wiped down maybe once before the first set appearance of the day. With a baby wipe, disinfects will ruin the paint and can't be used. So next time you let your baby gnaw on a character's nose, realize that Husha is probably the 100th baby to do so that day and is now ingesting the germs of all those other babies. The entertainment department ironically made me way less of a germaphobe. Story 64, I go to Disneyland a lot. I've experienced 18 on-ride breakdowns. They might ruin the magic for someone who doesn't visit Disneyland very frequently, but I'm used to them, LOL. It happens a lot. Story 65, I've only been to Disney when I was really young, but one moment really stuck out. I used to love the Small World ride, but one time it started to malfunction. The boat started going backwards, and the speakers were out of sync. You could hear the clicking of the doll's mouth because the music wasn't loud enough. If it was a horror movie, that would be when the dolls would come alive and kill us. It was fixed really quickly, but it was such a surreal experience, LOL. Story 66, things like air vents, backstage areas, speakers, or other things that Disney doesn't want you to pay attention to is all painted a color called Go Away Green. Yes, it's literally called that. If you look it up on Google Images, you'll understand what I mean. And then you can't look at any picture or video of the parks without seeing it everywhere. It's the perfect color where it blends into the sky and trees, but not the point that it looks odd when you put a Go Away Green light post in front of a colorful building. Story 67, I worked as an artist animator for Disney Imagineering for 3 years. Fun job. Learn a lot, both good and bad, about the entertainment biz. Incredible amounts of backstabbing, talented artists, and smacking amounts of cash just pissed away, want to ruin the magic. Work for Disney for an extended period of time. We had a saying for people who worked for them for ages and were still gung and excited about it. They got a lot of pixie dust in their veins. Story 68, former Disney employee here. Let's see. Most Disney employees are Disney fanatics themselves. Like, all the money they make pretty much go back to the company. Disney has figured out a way to monetize their own employees by offering them cast-exclusive merchandise and events. It's very common for Disney employees to go on vacations by staying at Disney hotels and going to the parks. There's also a culture of cliques among cast members. The entertainment cast members are usually perceived as the cool kids. These are your prince and princesses, performers, and sometimes extends to character attendance and photo pass. Some people treat encounters with prince and princesses as some type of celebrity encounter. I don't get it. And yes, some of them do develop an ego and act all high and mighty just because they get to play Elsa in meet and greets. The Disney college program is basically a big. That's oversimplifying it. But if you're ever at a Disney park and saw a cast member that looked tired, chances are they were out partying the night before and are hungover for work. My craziest college program story is when I did some cocaine off Princess Alina's at a college program party.